Hello and welcome to the Blood Reds Morning Bulletin. I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com writer, Dave Comerford. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the game at the weekend and then potentially a new arrival at Liverpool. But firstly, let's start with the game. Liverpool has made contact with the PGMOL in regards to two decisions against Aston Villa. I mean, one was obviously to do with the disallowed goal for Cody Gakpo. And then the other one is the challenge by Tyrone Mings on Gakpo as well, which, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the pictures going around of the scarring they left on Gakpo seemed pretty serious.
Yeah, I was just thinking on the thumbnail for the video this morning, you can actually see the photo of Gakpo with sort of the bottom of the boot scar almost on his chest.
I think he kind of showed it to the referee as well. Like, look, that's the mark that it made.
Yeah,
well,
there's a little clip of Alisson sort of raising his boot almost to demonstrate to the referee what happened. But yeah, I mean, I think you look at that and it just sort of, the referee must have looked at it and thought, I've made a mistake here, because as much as Mings does get to the ball first, I'm not sure how many times have we seen someone get the ball first and still get sent off? It's not necessarily to do with that. It's to do with the kind of recklessness of the challenge. And I think obviously with it being so high, as well as sort of so forceful, as you can see by the power of that follow through, then, he was very lucky to stay on the pitch. I mean, some people have made comparisons to the challenge from Jota and Oliver Skip a few weeks back. Obviously, he didn't receive a red card for that one. But again, is it a case of both decisions were wrong? And I can see why Liverpool are appealing it on that basis. I mean, I don't think even winning the game would have made a huge difference to their season, but certainly it's one that's left them scratching their heads, and justifiably so.
Yeah, I mean, even in that game, though, I will say Skip probably should have got sent off himself for a challenge on Luis Diaz. So there has been some questionable decisions. But I mean, the more sort of talked about thing that happened in that game is disallowed goal. It's been dissected all over social media by now, but it was a bit of a strange decision, wasn't it?
I think, yeah, the thing that confused me was, we've seen offside decisions ever since really VAR came in, have just been decided by the VAR and on field, and the referee gets the message, disallow the goal, award the goal, and then takes action from there. But this time, obviously, he went to the screen to look at it, and obviously subjective decision this time as opposed to an objective one. He decided that that Conte hadn't tried to play the ball. And I guess it's just interesting, I mean, to think about it, because they're trying to remove the subjectivity from offsides with obviously semi-automated offside, which is, incredibly precise. But I guess that decision at the weekend just shows, whatever you think of it, that you're never going to be able to do that with offsides, because there is always going to be those kind of question marks that crop into it where you will need still the judgment of the officials to come into play.
I mean, I think the other decision as well proves that football in general is never going to be an objective sport. It's always going to be a subjective one, and we're always going to have issues over who should have been sent off, what constitutes as offside as well. So yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't envy the referees for sure, but I think there probably could be more work done within the FA to try and make them a bit more consistent.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that sort of winds people up, isn't it? Is the inconsistency from game to game. One thing I will say is, a lot of Liverpool fans on Twitter have sort of posited this idea that there's some sort of agenda against the club. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, I think every fan base feels that they've been outdone by referees.
I was going to say that, yeah.
And if that's the case, then I think it just reflects, there's nothing sort of insidious about it at all. It's simply just the fact that mistakes get made quite frequently, and then everybody sort of feels that they're sort of bearing the brunt of that more so than other teams. But yeah, I'm interested to see, regardless of that, whether there's sort of an apology to Liverpool, because we've seen obviously that on a few occasions publicly and also privately as well, based on what Howard Webb was saying on Monday Night Football a week or so back. But yeah, maybe as well we'll see that kind of referee review from a member of the PGMOL next season more frequently, and then perhaps that kind of more transparent approach will help things a little bit.
Let's hope that happens, and I'm intrigued as well what the response will be. But sort of moving on to more positive news for Liverpool, or is it more positive news? I mean, we'll find out. But Alexis Mac Allister has been linked with Liverpool quite heavily now. The Echo reported that Manchester City and Manchester United are also kind of sniffing about, might be in the race for him. Fabrizio Romano has since said that this morning that that's not the case. City are not in for him. Don't know about Manchester United, but it does feel like Liverpool are the favourites. I'm saying this cautiously, but it feels like Liverpool could be the favourites to get him.
I think Liverpool have put the most work in when it comes to the actual personal term side of things. And the thing with Mac Allister is basically there's obviously this clause in his contract, which isn't a release clause, but it's kind of along similar lines based on what we sort of read about it, where he's available for kind of a reduced price. I think there's talk that he could be available for sort of less than like 60 or 65 million, which you're looking at kind of a really good deal for a player of that caliber. So naturally, regardless of how far down the line Liverpool are, you going to have top teams in the Premier League kind of sniffing around for him. You know, I think there's been talk about Chelsea as well as those two teams that you mentioned. So I agree that Liverpool do seem to be in pole position from everything we're sort of seeing. I just think, you know, given the potential for a bargain, we might sort of see kind of late challenges. But it's one of them where, like in the past, you just need to hope that Mac Allister's maybe like spoken to Klopp and that he's 100% convinced that his heart's already in Liverpool. And then, you know, hopefully that deal sort of does itself. And I mean, the interesting thing with City, I suppose, is when people kind of profile Mac Allister, they say a lot of the time he is kind of like a Brighton version of Gundogan in a way. And Gundogan's future is very much up in the air. You know, there was reports, I think yesterday, that Arsenal were looking at him, and he's obviously, his contract's expiring, he's not signed a new deal. So I suppose from that standpoint, he's kind of maybe a natural fit for City, but you just hope that from the Liverpool standpoint, the deal is so far advanced that it doesn't really affect things too much.
I mean, obviously as well, last night we saw Newcastle qualify for the Champions League, so now it's impossible for Liverpool to catch up with Newcastle. The only real possibility now for Liverpool, I mean, it was always going to be a stretch to catch up with Newcastle because of the goal difference, but now the only real possibility is to catch up with United, and that's still quite optimistic in terms of, you know, needing them to lose both games, and they're playing both times at home as well. So it does look like Liverpool will miss out on Champions League. How much do you think that is going to be an impact on, you know, not just Mac Allister, but other potential signings as well?
I mean, the thing is, you know, Liverpool have been putting in the groundwork for these transfers for a long time. And before kind of this winning streak recently, there was a chance that Liverpool weren't going to get Europe at all, never mind Champions League. So you have to think that the plan for the summer, which we kind of are led to believe consists of maybe like 3 midfielders, potentially a defender too, that plan's been formulated on the basis of playing Europa League football anyway, or maybe even Europa Conference League, whatever. And I think it was probably a case that there was 2 sorts of scenarios they mapped out for the window. One of them kind of Champions League, one of them without. And they'll just be able to enact kind of that plan B. And I suppose the interesting thing from the Liverpool standpoint is when you miss out on the Champions League, do you spend more or spend less? Because naturally you're going to get less sort of revenue. Does that impact your transfer budget? But also it's sort of this paradox where you then have to spend more of sort of a smaller budget to kind of get back up to that level. And I've always thought that with FSG, their main goal isn't necessarily to make Liverpool kind of the dominant team in English football. They just want Liverpool to be a team who can, you know, is pretty much guaranteed top 4 every season, and then you rely on someone like Klopp to maybe turn that into a title contender. And obviously this season they've realised that they've not invested enough to make that the case. So I think we'll see kind of a surge of investment regardless to get Liverpool back up to that Champions League level, which is obviously very lucrative for FSG.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer for sure, and I think I agree with you. I think there's going to be a fair few new arrivals at Anfield over the course of the whole 3 months sort of that the transfer window will be open for. But I think that about wraps it up for today. Thanks, Dave, for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And as always, do check out the rest of the Blood Red content going out today as well, and all the written content on Liverpool.com as well.